often, whether it's in seminar or after I've delivered a keynote, I hear from Indigenous people in the audience that say, thank you for giving me the words to explain to people what I've experienced or what I'm going through or whatever the case may be. That's how I felt when I came across this new word recently. We've talked about Pretendians for sure on this channel, and we will continue doing that. I'm going to touch on it again today. But today we got to talk about something else. It's definitely a word I needed, and that's Descendians. Let's talk about it. Bonjour, Mishko Paganon, Quain Addition Cosmongdodam. Hi everybody, my name is Sandy Boucher. I'm Red Thunderbolt Woman of the Loon Clan, a proud member of Seine River First Nation in Treaty 3 territory in Northern Ontario, and today we gotta talk about Descendians. But first, it starts with the whole problem with Pretendians. Now, I want to be crystal clear here. An Indigenous person cannot be a Pretendian, right? So if you were raised urban, you've never been on the reserve, you don't know your language, you don't know your customs, you were 60s scoop, you were adopted out, you were raised in foster care with non-Indigenous people, that does not change your bloodline. You are still Indigenous, which means you cannot be a Pretendian. Having said that, in my humble opinion, if you are going to go after funding or put your name in for an Indigenous specific award, you need to be able to prove you're Indigenous. I mean, because the problem with Pretendians, these are not people sitting silently in a room. They are presenting themselves as speaking for Indigenous peoples, or they're going after the funding, they're going after the awards, they're going after the accolades. There's something in it for them. And they are taking up incredibly rare Indigenous spaces. And that's the flippin' problem. So what we have to talk about now, there are so many different lived experiences for Indigenous people. I know McMahon's his last name. What's his first name? From Kuchiching. Amazing Indigenous activist, news reporter, was on Canada Land. Ryan McMahon. That's what it is. I knew if I kept talking, I would get it. Because it's always like, well, how do you figure out who's Indigenous? And his response, one of the answers he gave, this was quite a while ago. His answer may have changed now. People grow. But I loved his original answer. And he was actually on the National when I heard him say this. And his answer was, who claims you? If you're Indigenous, who claims you? And what he meant was your community, your treaty area, who claims you? And what I loved the most about that is First Nations claim the children that were taken in 60 Scoop. They claim the kids that have been adopted and fostered out. So even if those kids don't know who they are, the First Nation knows who they are. Someone claims them. When we ask each other, where are you from? We're not talking about where do you live. We're talking about your community. Who's your community? Who's your people? I know for me, obviously, white presenting Indigenous person, and we've joked around about the fact that I seem to be fading with age or lousy makeup, whichever the day happens to be. But I love the fact that when I'm presenting, especially in a First Nation community, or I have the opportunity to speak to an elder, often they kind of look at me like, that they're doubting, right? Like, who's this white chick, right? And I don't blame them. Look at me. But then I start talking and I share with them what I believe or how things seem to me, and they recognize Nish. They recognize the Indigenous worldview. They recognize my lived experience. They recognize where I came from. And it has nothing to do with the blonde streaks in my hair to try to offset the gray streaks in my hair. And I love that. I love that because that's like the most welcoming, warm hug. And you don't get that from Pretendians. Pretendians have no lived experience being Indigenous. And by the way, if you don't know your language and you were adopted out and you grew up urban, but you always knew you were different, and you didn't look like any of your family members, and you were ostracized and people treated you horribly because you were Indigenous, even though you have never been raised that way, that is an Indigenous lived experience. Just saying. But Pretendians don't have that. As my girlfriend so aptly put, they want our rhythm without the blues. Beautiful black activist she is, and I love her dearly, and that just summed it up, right? They want the accolades, they want the award money, they want the funding. They haven't paid the pain. And I know that was used to be my sentence. What's the price you've paid for being Indigenous? I've paid in tons. There are some stories I will never share on this channel. I have paid in so many ways, and so have my children. So that's being Indigenous, and that's why we shake our heads when these people want to line up and claim they're Indigenous and they think it's so cool. It's like, you know what? If you think it's cool, you have no idea what it's like to be Indigenous. Because that is a hard freaking journey. Any Indigenous person can tell you that. But the Pretendians wouldn't know that. So first off, the big one for me, now we could go way back to Grail. I'm not going to do that. I'm talking like in recent years, was Joseph Boyden, who, and this one broke my heart. Not to the deep level that Buffy did, and that's only because I was first introduced to Buffy as a child, impressionable child. I was an adult when I first heard of Joseph Boyden, but Richard Wagamese, my mind just went blank. Richard Wagamese and I had a chance, we had some conversations, we debated working together, got to drive him around my city and show him the city here, and we had some really good conversations. And I was introduced, I didn't actually meet him, we didn't have a conversation, but we were in the same room together because Joseph Boyden and Richard Wagamese were doing an event together. And Richard considered Joseph his friend. And I pray that wasn't because he thought Joseph was Indigenous, because Joseph claimed to be. First, he was part of a community, then grew up close to a community, then finally came out and admitted he wasn't Indigenous. And there's a person that got so many awards for he's an amazing author, but he's not Indigenous. Like, again, that reminds me of the Buffy story. Like, if you can't become famous or earn your accolades based on the truth, then you don't deserve those accolades, right? And it's what, I'm going to go off on a tangent here for a second, rant for a second. It's what I hate about the advertising of so many Indigenous businesses. That they're saying, like, you got to come buy from us because we're Indigenous. And, like, it's almost like they want non-Indigenous people to feel bad and come buy for them out of sympathy. I don't want anyone buying from me because they feel bad. I want you buying from me because you think my products have quality and you admire my work and I help you understand things and it's worth the price you pay. Yeah. So if, like Joseph Boyden, be a damn good author. Get the awards that way. Don't pretend to be Indigenous. Carrie Burough was the next one I came across, and academia is so prone to pretendians because they are looking for the people with the colonial education to not just a university degree, like master's, PhD levels. And often, like, we're seeing way more true Indigenous at that level now, which is good. But they tend to want to find someone that's easy to work with. Indigenous is a cross-cultural relationship. That may not be easy. So, excuse me, knew I had to yawn at some point. So, prone to hiring pretendians. Now, Carrie Burough, I have it on my other monitor here, can you tell? She was at the University of Saskatchewan. And what did she say? She claimed to be Métis, Anishinaabe, and Tlingit. I'm not right, totally probably pronounced that. CBC did an investigation, found no evidence of any Indigenous ancestry. All her relatives appear to be of European descent. Now, what she was the professor in the Department of Community Health and Epidemiology. I have no idea. That's a colonial word. Anyways, so she was discovered. She resigned from the university. Don't think there was a lot of choice there. Michelle Ladimer, movie producer. And yeah, she claimed to have contemporary kinship ties to Kinnikin, Zibi, Anishinaabe, an Algonquin First Nation about 120 kilometers north of Ottawa, until the First Nation came up and said, we have no flippin' idea who this is. So if you think you can just randomly choose a First Nation community to be a pretendian, no. And then Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond, I did a podcast episode on her. Just look back in past episodes. She's out in the East Coast. She claimed to be Mi'kmaq, I guess, which I thought was hilarious when it came out. Because Pam Pomer is Mi'kmaq. And if you know Pam Pomer, I'm a huge fan. She's a very outspoken, educated activist. She teaches at the University of Toronto, formerly Ryerson. She's amazing. And why would you pretend to be from her community? That's like a risk nobody should take. So I thought that was funny. But she had a whole bunch of awards stripped from her, and then she voluntarily gave up her Order of Canada, I think it was. I'm not sure. She gave up one of her awards voluntarily, and I had to give her kudos for that. At least that was amazing. So those are the pretendians. None of them are Indigenous. They had no Indigenous ancestry, right? That's the problem. But what about, and you've heard me say this 100 times, what about the people that if your cultural makeup is a 500-piece puzzle, and one puzzle piece 6 generations ago was Indigenous, are you Indigenous? And that's where I came across this word. The word is a Descendian, meaning you are presenting yourself as being Indigenous, but all you have is that one puzzle piece 6 generations ago. So think of the influence in your family. The Indigenous teachings didn't get passed down. The Indigenous culture didn't get passed down. The Indigenous worldview didn't get passed down. It got drowned out by all the other puzzle pieces. So in my opinion, feel free to say you have some Indigenous ancestry, which would be true and authentic and transparent. But to say you're Indigenous, not so much. So what do I have the definition of Descendian? I can't find it. Anyways, Descendian, like I said, is that person that is trying to claim Indigenous ancestry. They have some. They have the one puzzle piece. But they're trying to set themselves up as, I now know so much and speak for Indigenous people. And that is part of cultural genocide. That is part of the violence that is inflicted on Indigenous people. We are fighting so hard to speak for ourselves. And to have these people speaking for us does not help. I don't get upset when someone asks me, am I Indigenous or how am I Indigenous? Although I have to admit, and it was only when I started doing YouTube videos, someone asked me if I married in. And that, I had never been asked that before, which is a distinct possibility. If you were a white woman and you married an Indigenous man before 1985, you became Indigenous and had a status card, which is like absolutely ridiculous. Like, does your blood type or blood change because of who you sleep with or marry? Thanks, Canada, for that confusion. So no, I did not marry in. My mom's bloodline is Couchiching First Nation. I am my status card, a proud member of Seine River First Nation, and my mom's now, or was when she passed away, a member of Seine River First Nation, because when she married her first husband, he's from Seine River, and your membership transfers with who your husband is, because that's a colonial influence too. But our family, the Jourdains from Couchiching. Yeah. So ask the questions. Even though some people might get upset about it, I think it's a step in the right direction. Let's not just assume. And for all the non-Indigenous entities out there, you shouldn't be vetting who's Indigenous. You should be partnering with your local Indigenous community and let them vet. We don't need any more non-Indigenous people deciding who we are. But we can tell you who we are. So, Descendians and Pretendians, shut up. You're taking up too much space, and we need it. And the people that depend on guidance and need guidance and education on how to work with Indigenous people need to hear us. So if you could please get out of the way, I'd super duper appreciate it. To all the rest of you here on my channel, just here to love and learn, thank you for just being you. I love you. Sorry for the very weird video today. Guess I'm in a weird kind of mood. It's okay too. It's authentic. I love you. Take care. Bye-bye.